In a mansion built by algorithms and silence, every adult treated 8-year-old Ava Langford like a glitch in her father's perfect code. 5 nannies had already quit, every therapist failed, and the only sound that ever seemed welcome inside the glass and steel palace was the echo of Julian Langford's voice, sharp, efficient, always in control. Julian wasn't just a man, he was a brand. The billionaire behind EchoMind, an AI company that promised to make communication seamless. But inside his own home, his daughter hadn't spoken in 2 years. Ava had gone quiet after her mother's sudden death, a car crash the tabloids called the Silicon Widow's tragedy. In the first few weeks, everyone assumed she was in shock. By the second month, she stopped responding altogether. By the 6th, the specialists called it progressive deafness. Julian called it defiance. He didn't believe in disorders. He believed in data. And the Langford estate ran like one of his systems, every moment logged, every motion tracked. The walls could dim themselves, the windows adjusted for sunlight, and even the kitchen ran on predictive algorithms that knew what the family wanted before they did. Except no one knew what Ava wanted. She spent her days drawing in corners, moving her fingers in small, repetitive patterns that looked to everyone else like nervous tics. Tutors tried talking louder, slower, and even using flashcards. Ava just stared. One nanny lasted 4 hours, another lasted 3 days. One left crying, saying the girl's silence felt like a mirror. By the 6th resignation, Julian stopped hiring specialists. He hired staff who didn't ask questions. Cleaners, cooks, drivers, people paid to stay invisible. That's how Naomi Ellis arrived. Naomi wasn't like the others. She was 32, quiet, steady, the kind of woman who had learned to fold her voice into herself just to survive. She'd grown up on the south side of Chicago, where silence was often safety. Her brother Malik had been deaf since birth. Their mother worked double shifts, and Naomi learned sign language before she could even spell her own name. When the agency sent her to the Langford estate, they told her, "Don't talk to the child, don't look her in the eye, just clean the West Wing." And that's exactly what she did. For weeks, she moved like a shadow between glass walls, folding laundry and polishing screens that didn't need cleaning. The girl barely noticed her, or so Naomi thought. Then one afternoon, everything changed. A crash shattered the calm, glass splintering across marble. Naomi turned sharply. Ava stood frozen by the dining table, a plate shattered at her feet. A nanny towered over her, shouting words the child couldn't hear but clearly understood. Ava's hands trembled as she pressed them over her ears, not from sound but from memory. The nanny grabbed her wrist. Ava flinched and retreated beneath the table, shaking. The nanny muttered, "She does this for attention," and stormed out. Naomi approached slowly. The girl didn't look up, just kept tapping her fingers against the floor in a pattern. Tap, pause, tap, tap, pause. It wasn't random. Naomi knew that rhythm. Her heart stilled. She crouched beside the table and without thinking signed a single word. "Hello." Ava froze mid-tap. Her eyes darted up, wide, wild. "Did you just?" Naomi signed again. "It's okay." Ava's lips moved silently. "You see me?" And for the first time in 2 years she smiled. That night Naomi couldn't sleep. Her hands still trembled from what she'd seen. No one else in that house had noticed. No one else could have noticed. The girl wasn't unreachable. She was unheard. But Naomi also knew what crossing lines in rich people's houses could cost. You speak too much, you disappear. You see too much, you lose your job. So she kept quiet. She told herself it was none of her business. But the next morning, when she walked past the west corridor and saw Ava sitting alone by the glass wall, hands moving again, signing to no one, Naomi stopped pretending she hadn't seen. As Naomi watched, the motion sensors above Ava blinked red. The house was recording her. Naomi stepped into the room, her voice soft. "You like to draw?" she asked, though she knew the girl couldn't hear. Ava turned, hesitant. Naomi knelt and pointed to the drawing, a rough sketch of a woman with her hands out, palms open, surrounded by waves. Then Ava touched her own throat and shook her head. Naomi signed slowly. "No sound?" Ava nodded. Naomi hesitated, then signed one more word. "Together?" Ava's eyes lit up, as if someone had just opened a window in a room that had been locked for years. She reached for a crayon and started to draw another figure beside the first. Darker skin, kind eyes. Naomi. Before we go deeper into this story, the moment that changes both their lives forever, take a second to subscribe. Because what happens next, you'll need to see it to believe it. Days passed, and whispers began spreading through the staff. Mrs. Kent, the head housekeeper, noticed Naomi spending too much time near the girl. "You're here to clean," she said flatly, "not to bond." Naomi apologized, but her eyes betrayed her. She couldn't turn off what she'd seen. Every afternoon, when the others took breaks, Naomi would find small excuses to pass through the west corridor to see if Ava was okay. One day, Ava slipped a folded paper to her. Inside was a drawing of two hands, one light, one dark, meeting in mid-air. Naomi looked up. Ava pointed to it, then signed a word Naomi recognized instantly. "Friend." Naomi almost cried. However, later that evening, while cleaning the study, Naomi discovered something unusual. A document open on one of Julian Langford's monitors, titled Auditory Response Conditioning, Subject AL. She scrolled. Her heart dropped. There were notes about compliance tests, memory suppression, and neural shock thresholds. The subject ID matched Ava's birth date. Naomi shut the screen and backed away, terrified. The silence around her suddenly felt hostile, mechanical, alive. The walls that once gleamed now seemed to watch, and as she turned to leave, she saw her reflection in the glass. Behind her, in the faint glow of the security system, Ava stood in the hallway, still, silent, watching her. Her small hands moved, slowly, deliberately. Naomi froze. Ava was signing a single sentence. "They don't like it when I talk." After that afternoon, Naomi's routine changed. Her cleaning schedule doubled, her territory expanded, and quietly the cameras in the West Wing started following her more closely. Mrs. Kent, the head housekeeper, cornered her by the linen closet one morning. "Keep your distance from the girl," she warned. Her voice clipped like metal. "She's under medical supervision. You're here to clean, not connect." Naomi just nodded, but deep down she already knew. She couldn't go back to pretending Ava didn't exist. Every morning, she'd catch glimpses of the child, sitting cross-legged in the sunroom, tracing invisible shapes in the air, pressing her ear to the floor to feel vibrations when footsteps passed. The mansion itself seemed to shrink away from sound. Even the air purifiers hummed like whispers. When a cook dropped a pan one day, Ava collapsed to her knees, trembling. Naomi rushed to help, only to see Mrs. Kent's icy stare from across the room. The message was clear: stay in your lane. But Naomi couldn't unsee the fear on that little girl's face, the kind she'd seen before, years ago, when Malik came home from a special school bruised and silent after teachers tried to correct his deafness. Naomi had learned then. Sometimes the worst pain isn't what you hear, it's what no one listens to. That evening, Naomi was scrubbing the marble hallway when she heard faint tapping, soft, rhythmic, deliberate. She turned. Ava stood behind a glass door, watching her. Her fingers moved. "Are you okay?" Naomi's breath caught. The girl remembered. She glanced toward the cameras, then signed back, "Yes." Ava smiled, a tiny flicker of warmth in the cold, coded house. But as Naomi signed goodnight, the hallway lights blinked twice, an automated motion sensor. Except she hadn't moved. The house was listening. The next morning, a new rule appeared on the digital notice board in the staff room. Employees are to refrain from non-verbal communication with Miss Langford. Violators will be terminated immediately. Naomi stared at the message until it blurred. Someone had seen them. She decided to keep her head down, but fate doesn't respect boundaries drawn by the powerful. That night, while cleaning the study, she overheard voices through the cracked door. Mrs. Kent's sharp tone and a man's lower one she didn't recognize. "The dosage needs to increase," Mrs. Kent said. "The results aren't meeting benchmarks." "It's experimental," the man replied. Her father approved it privately. No documentation. Naomi froze mid-step. Her rag slipped from her hand, hitting the floor with a dull thud. The voices stopped. Footsteps approached the door. She barely made it to the hallway before Mrs. Kent opened it. Their eyes met. "Working late, are we?" the older woman asked. Naomi forced a polite smile. "Just finishing up, ma'am." Mrs. Kent's gaze lingered for a second too long before she shut the door again. As Naomi turned to leave, she saw the reflection on the polished glass wall. Inside the study, the man was holding a syringe, and on the desk beside him, a child's medical file labelled AL. The next day, Ava didn't appear at breakfast or lunch. Naomi asked a gardener where the girl was. "Medical testing," he muttered under his breath, glancing at the cameras. "They keep saying it's therapy." Therapy. That word made Naomi's stomach twist. Later that night, Naomi found Ava asleep on the couch in the West Wing. A faint bruise marked her arm where a needle had gone in. The girl stirred when Naomi touched her shoulder, blinking groggily, confused. Naomi signed gently, "Are you hurt?" Ava hesitated. Then she signed back. "They said it will fix me." Naomi's throat tightened. "You're not broken," she whispered, forgetting the girl couldn't hear her. But Ava smiled faintly anyway, like she understood. "Before we go deeper into this, before Naomi uncovers what those treatments really mean, pause for a second and subscribe. Because the next few minutes will change everything you think you know about this house." The following week, Naomi's access card stopped working on certain doors. Mrs. Kent reassigned her to the lower floors, away from the child. But Naomi had already learned the house's rhythm. When the others clocked out, she stayed late, polishing screens until midnight. That's when the estate's lights dimmed and the digital locks reset. One night she slipped into the west corridor again. The monitors hummed quietly, their green lights blinking in unison. She reached Ava's door and froze. The room was empty. Only a soft beeping came from behind a wall panel. She pressed her ear against it and heard muffled voices, scientific jargon, machine whirs, and a small, frightened breath. Ava was on the other side. Naomi found a narrow maintenance vent and crawled through, emerging into a hidden lab beneath the house. The room glowed sterile white. Ava sat strapped to a reclined chair, electrodes on her temples, eyes wide with fear. Mrs. Kent and the same man stood nearby, checking data on tablets. "Increase the frequency," the man said. "We need a full neural sync." "She's seizing," Mrs. Kent replied. "If this fails, he'll cut funding." Naomi clapped a hand over her mouth to stop a gasp. She slipped her phone out and hit record. Then Ava's eyes found her. Their gazes locked. Ava's fingers twitched weakly, spelling a word Naomi could barely make out. "Help!" A machine alarm blared. Mrs. Kent spun around. "Who's there?" Naomi ducked behind a console, heart pounding. Through the noise, she heard Ava start humming, a low, broken sound that made the machine spike. The man shouted, "She's rejecting the sync." Naomi crawled backward through the vent, the phone still recording. Her arm brushed a cable, and a monitor crashed to the floor. Mrs. Kent's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Someone's in the system. Lock the West Wing." Naomi fled up the corridor, slipping through the shadows until she reached the laundry room, gasping. She replayed the video. The timestamp, the voices, the data. It was all there. Proof. The next morning, Mrs. Kent stood at the door, clipboard in hand. "New schedule," she said. "You're being reassigned to storage, effective immediately." Naomi looked at her, then at the cameras lining the hall. They weren't just watching her anymore. They were studying her. And from somewhere deep in the house, a familiar sound echoed. 3 faint taps on the wall, rhythmic, deliberate. Ava's signal. She was still trying to talk. The next morning, Naomi walked through the mansion with new eyes. Every corner of the Langford estate hummed with quiet deceit. White surfaces, glass walls, and silence too heavy to be peaceful. She started noticing the small things no one else did. The biohazard bins marked therapy disposals. The subtle lock sound that came from Ava's door each night. The way the house AI always redirected her cleaning schedule away from the West Wing during doctor visits. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. Naomi began keeping a hidden notebook in her supply cart. She listed times, dates, sounds, and even smells. The faint scent of metal after every therapy. The dull glaze in Ava's eyes when she came back from the lab room. But what broke her most was how the child smiled through it all. A quiet, brave little smile, because silence was the only thing she had left to protect herself. Naomi couldn't let it go. She started taking pictures on an old flip phone. A label here, a medical vial there. Nothing too obvious. But late one night, she made a mistake. While dusting near the study, she accidentally triggered the AI motion sensor. It beeped. A red light blinked. From the corner of her eye, she saw Mrs. Kent appear at the far end of the hallway, arms folded, expression unreadable. "Why are you in this section after hours?" she asked. Naomi froze. "Just cleaning up early, ma'am." Mrs. Kent stepped closer. "That won't be necessary. Go back to your quarters." As Naomi turned to leave, she caught sight of something inside the office, a folder half open, titled Behavioral Correction, Phase 3. That night, Naomi couldn't sleep. Her hands shook as she opened her phone and scrolled through the photos she'd taken. Words she barely understood flashed before her eyes. Stimulation trials, auditory rewiring, consent, waived. She realized then it wasn't therapy, it was control. The next day, Naomi entered the playroom, trying to act normal. Ava was sitting by the window, tapping her fingers rhythmically on the glass. Short, short, long, short. It wasn't random. It was Morse code. Naomi crouched beside her. "What are you saying, baby?" Ava turned, her eyes glistening, and signed, "Help me." Naomi felt her chest tighten. She signed back softly, "I'm trying." Then Ava signed something else. Mom said, "Don't trust Dad's friends." Naomi froze. The sentence was too structured, too clear. Ava remembered. "Did your mom say that before she—" Naomi hesitated. Ava nodded. "Before she died." That same afternoon, Naomi saw Julian Langford for the first time up close. The man everyone called a visionary looked like he hadn't slept in months. He walked with purpose, his phone glued to his ear, barking quiet orders about AI child integration and public perception metrics. And then Naomi realized the company physician wasn't some outsider. He was Langford's employee. The man experimenting on Ava was hired by her own father. Naomi's pulse pounded in her ears. She didn't know who to trust anymore. But she knew one thing. She needed proof big enough to destroy them. Before we continue, if this story already has your heart racing, hit subscribe right now. These are the untold stories of power, silence, and survival, told through the eyes of those the world forgets. Now, back to the story. Naomi spent the next 2 weeks building a plan. She used her cleaning access to memorize security codes, hiding mini recording devices in the vents near the study and lab corridor. Every night, she'd take one out, charge it secretly in her room, then replace it before sunrise. And each night, she caught fragments of horror. Increased dosage, no reaction. Her brain is adapting too quickly. Langford wants her calm for the demo. No emotions. Naomi's jaw clenched. Calm for the demo? What demo? One evening, Ava approached her carrying a sketch pad. She opened it to reveal a drawing. Her father on a stage, bright lights above, and herself beside him, small and expressionless. Underneath, she'd written one phrase in shaky letters. He said, "Be quiet for the cameras." Naomi knew then what was coming. The Langford Gala. A public unveiling of his new AI, one designed to enhance child communication. And the face of that campaign was Ava. Naomi's decision was made. She would expose everything that night, but she needed to make it count. On the morning of the gala, Naomi entered the control hub of the mansion under the guise of polishing. She plugged in a small flash drive, the one Malik, her tech-savvy brother, had mailed her weeks ago. It contained an auto-synced broadcast trigger. If inserted into the main server, it could override the presentation feed for 60 seconds. That was all she'd need. 1 minute of truth. As evening fell, the mansion transformed into a cathedral of light and vanity. Journalists, investors, cameras flashing. Julian Langford took centre stage, smiling like a god. Ava stood beside him, small, trembling, her hearing aid blinking red. Naomi slipped through the side corridor, her heart hammering. She connected the flash drive just as she heard applause begin. The feed blinked, the projector flickered, and suddenly every screen went black. Then it happened. Ava looked at the crowd. At her father. Then, slowly, she raised her small hands into the air, signing words Naomi had helped her form in secret. "You broke my ears to make me quiet." The room gasped, cameras turned, Julian froze mid-sentence, and before he could react, the synced audio file began to play across the hall. Mrs. Kent's voice, cold and mechanical. He said, "Fix her before the press conference. No one wants a disabled heir." Gasps rippled through the room. Investors exchanged horrified glances. Julian's jaw dropped open. And Naomi, hidden in the shadows, knew the world had finally heard what silence had been hiding all along. But the question now wasn't what they'd do to Ava. It was what they'd do to Naomi once the lights went out. The first scream didn't come from the crowd. It came from the speakers. The moment the audio played, chaos fractured the perfection of Julian Langford's gala. Security guards scrambled, cameras flashed. Reporters swarmed forward like vultures, sensing blood. And right there, frozen under the lights, Julian turned toward his daughter, the child he'd tried to silence, his lips parting, but no sound coming out. Ava didn't flinch. For the first time in her life, silence belonged to her. Naomi stood near the corner of the ballroom, hidden behind a wall of gold-trimmed mirrors. She watched as the crowd erupted, questions flying, investors storming out, Mrs. Kent trying to slip away unnoticed. But Naomi was ready for that. She'd already handed a copy of the recordings to a local journalist earlier that day. By the time the lights came back on, every major news network had the same file queued for upload. There was no turning it off. Not anymore. Within minutes, the Langford name, once whispered with reverence, was trending worldwide for all the wrong reasons. The feed headlines read, "Tech billionaire exposed in daughter's medical abuse scandal." Julian Langford was escorted away by police before midnight. Mrs. Kent was taken in for questioning. The company physician turned himself in the next morning. But Naomi didn't stay to watch. She quietly clocked out, left her uniform folded on the laundry counter, and walked out of the estate under a sky that finally looked open. 2 days later, the door to her apartment rattled with the sound of reporters. They wanted the exclusive, the brave housekeeper who saved the billionaire's daughter. But Naomi never opened the door. Instead, she sat at her small wooden table, flipping through her brother Malik's old notebook, the one filled with sign language sketches and words he'd taught her. On the last page, he'd written, "When people stop listening, speak with your hands." Naomi smiled faintly. It wasn't bravery. It was listening. That evening, her phone buzzed with a private message. A video Ava at a child rehabilitation centre sitting with a therapist. Her tiny fingers moved slowly, signing thank you to someone off camera. Naomi pressed play again and again. Each time she noticed new details, how Ava's hands no longer shook, how her eyes looked steady. For once, the girl wasn't surviving. She was healing. 3 months later, Naomi received an unexpected visitor. A black sedan parked outside her building. No sirens, no bodyguards. Julian Langford stepped out, no designer suit this time, just a wrinkled shirt and eyes heavy with shame. Naomi didn't move as he approached. "Miss Ellis," he said quietly, "I wanted to thank you." She didn't respond. He held up a small notebook, its pages filled with shaky sketches of hand signs. "I'm learning," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "For her." Then he raised his trembling hands. His signs were clumsy, broken, but they were real. "Thank you." Naomi stared at him for a long moment before signing back. "Then start with your daughter." He nodded slowly. "I'm trying." As he turned to leave, Naomi noticed something odd, a hearing aid in his own ear. He'd started wearing one, not because he needed it, because he wanted to understand what silence felt like. Before we continue, if stories like this move you, if you believe silence has power, then make sure to subscribe right now, because here we tell the stories others bury, the ones that remind us you don't need a voice to make noise. Now back to Naomi. Weeks passed. The world moved on to newer scandals. Langford Industries fell apart, piece by piece, but one story refused to fade, the story of the little girl who exposed her billionaire father without saying a single word. Naomi received letters from parents across the country. Some had deaf children. Others had simply stopped being heard. All of them said the same thing. "Your hands gave us courage." She never responded to most of them. She didn't want to be a savior. She just wanted peace. But peace didn't come easily. One night, she woke to the sound of footsteps outside her apartment. She reached for the bat under her bed. Then came a soft knock. When she opened the door, a small hand held up a drawing. It was Ava, smiling, her hair shorter now, a therapy dog by her side. Naomi knelt. Ava signed, "I'm safe now." Tears filled Naomi's eyes as she signed back, "I know." Then Ava pointed upward at the quiet night sky, the city lights blinking far above. She signed, "It's not quiet anymore, it's alive." Naomi laughed softly. "Yes, baby, it's alive." In the months that followed, Naomi joined a non-profit teaching sign language in underfunded schools. She didn't tell anyone who she was, but sometimes she'd walk into a classroom and find a child signing clumsily, "Thank you," without knowing who taught them the words. And somewhere miles away, Ava Langford's story became part of something bigger, an AI research project renamed Project Lila, dedicated to creating communication tools for deaf and non-verbal children. Funded not by profit, but by restitution. On a quiet Sunday morning, Naomi sat on her porch with Malik, now grown, his hands moving fast as they signed about everything and nothing. The TV inside played faintly, an interview with Ava, now smiling in front of a new school for deaf kids. The reporter asked, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Ava smiled and signed, a listener. Naomi turned off the TV, leaned back and whispered, "That's all the world ever needed." Outside, sirens echoed in the distance, but they sounded different now. Not warnings, not fear, just life. And for the first time in years, silence wasn't a cage. It was a language.